Okay, so it should be Monday for you, and, unless you wanted to do this on Saturday, you couldn't wait to hear the next chapter, maybe that's you. So our next chapter is it's called Jericho. So again, if you have your maps, I would ask that you, locate Jericho on your map, that's gonna be important, to the story. All right. Something was kicking Jotham in the behind, and he didn't like it. He was still sound asleep and had every intention of staying that way. Jotham, get up! It was the second time Jotham had heard the voice, and this time he recognized that it of Bartholomew. Remember his friend Bartholomew? It's time for morning prayers, Bartholomew whispered as the other boys looked at him crossly for talking. Jotham opened one eye just enough to see, then mumbled, I don't feel like praying today. He had been awake very late thinking about what Nathan had said last night and had only slept a few hours. So, again, if you want to recap and narrate kind of to yourself what had happened, back in that previous chapter I just read with what Nathan told him about his lineage and his line or anything from that beginning, I would encourage you to again narrate. You can pause this, kind of narrate it to yourself or to your parent. You must go to morning prayers, Bartholomew pleaded. Everyone must go. But Jotham ignored Bartholomew. After a moment, a sly look crossed Bartholomew's face, and he said in a taunting voice, The rabbi will be most displeased if you're not at morning prayers. Jotham's eyes shot open as he remembered the lesson the rabbi had taught Bartholomew the night before. In moments, he was out of bed and dressed, not wanting his bottom to suffer the same fate. The prayers were said in a small synagogue by a garden. Then the morning meal was served. Bartholomew didn't utter a word during these teachings. Afterward, Jotham helped him to do his chores, which involved moving the big clay urns from the pottery building where they had been baked to the room where the scriptures were copied. Remember, there's a lot of copying these days. That means like they would just have to by hand, write again the Bible, the Torah, the law. They would have to write it by hand because there was no typewriter back in these days. There was no printer. The sun had moved an hour across the sky when the two boys carried the last of the urns out of the furnace room. They were walking to the scribe's room when Bartholomew in the lead carrying the top of the urn and Jotham carrying the bottom, when Bartholomew suddenly slipped. The urn went crashing to the ground and broke into 1,000 pieces. Just then the rabbi came walking across the compound and at the sound of the crash turned to look. Bartholomew looked back and forth between the urn and the rabbi, his face looking like a cornered rabbit. Rabbi, he stuttered, forgive me. I slipped in the dirt and the urn just. Rabbi held up his hand to interrupt Bartholomew. He looked slowly from the broken urn to the panic on the boy's face. Bartholomew, he said slowly, why are you so frightened? Is it because of the lesson you learned last night? Bartholomew nodded his head. The rabbi grasped the boy's shoulder and said softly, Bartholomew, the punishment you received last night was for you willfully breaking one of our rules. This, he said, it was just a mistake. It was an accident. We do not punish men or boys for making mistakes, only for acting in disobedience. Bartholomew stopped quivering and even managed a little smile. Just then Nathan walked up. Jotham, it's time to leave, he said. Jotham looked at Bartholomew and suddenly wasn't so sure he wanted to leave. But then he said, Yes, Nathan, I will go gather my things. With Bartholomew's help, Jotham gathered his new clothes, a blanket the dormitory keeper had given them, and a new food bag. Just before they left the dormitory, Bartholomew handed Jotham a walking stick. Here, he said, I want you to have this. It is my favorite, and it would be my honor if you would use it. Jotham stood there with his mouth open, the right word stuck somewhere behind his tongue. It's all right, said Bartholomew. I have another, and you should not be traveling without one. Look on the front. You see, he has it on the front, that walking stick. And again, he's met a wonderful friend in Bartholomew, hasn't he? Jotham gave Bartholomew a long hug as he had seen his father do after successful business transactions. Then together they went and found Nathan. It was hard to walk out the front gate, leaving Qumran behind. Jotham turned and gave a last wave to Bartholomew and hoped that he would see him again someday. You were quiet this morning, Nathan said after a long while. I will miss Qumran, Jotham answered, then a moment later added, and Bartholomew. After some time, he asked, "How far is it to Jericho?" "Less than half the distance we traveled from Engedi to Qumran," Nathan answered. Jotham was pleased with this, and it lifted his spirits. They stopped to eat their noon meal among the trees and reeds at the place where the Jordan River enters the Salt Sea. Jotham had never seen such a beautiful place and begged Nathan to let him swim in the river. "No, no, we must continue on," Nathan said, "if we are to reach Jericho by sundown." All afternoon, Jotham kept quizzing Nathan about Jericho. Though it was the place of his birth, Jotham really didn't know much about it. Remember, we found out in the first chapter, Jotham was born in Jericho. Remember, when he introduces himself, he says, "I'm Jotham of Jericho." But again, that doesn't mean just because you're born somewhere doesn't mean you stay there. And that's not what his family did. His family moved around a lot, as we saw in the first chapter with their caravan of places. But um, though it was the place of his birth, Jotham didn't really know much about it. "Will there be camel tricks there?" he asked. "Perhaps," Nathan answered. "What about snakes? I heard of a man who is a god of snakes and charms with them with a flute. Will he be there?" "Probably not." Finally, Nathan was exasperated with all the questions and stopped in the middle of the road. "Jotham," he said sharply, "you must really stop asking questions about Jericho." "But Nathan, why?" Jotham asked. "Because, my friend," Nathan said, smiling, "we are there." And with that, Nathan pointed to a grove of palm trees that seemed to stick up out of the middle of the road. Beyond them, Jotham saw the city of his birth. Jericho was even more beautiful than Jotham had remembered. Palm trees thick with dates lined the streets. All the houses were made of a reddish plaster, and the roofs were brown tiles made of clay. Plants and shrubs made everything green, and everywhere Jotham looked, he saw a water well. What a rich and beautiful city, Jotham thought. This is where the Messiah should be born. Nathan led Jotham through several streets. Soon they stopped at a doorway along a narrow street and knocked on the door. A man not much taller than Jotham, but very much older, came to the door, and seeing Nathan, he broke into a huge grin. "Nathan, my friend," he yelled, embracing him, "I was just thinking of you this morning." "And why was that? Did you break yet another pot?" The man laughed loudly. "No such thing. I simply missed you, my friend." They entered the house, and Nathan said, "Silas, I would like you to meet my young friend, Jotham of Jericho." Then to Jotham he added, "Silas and I trained under the same rabbi when we were young, that is, until he left in order to make his wealth as a merchant." "Ah, Nathan," Silas said with a laugh, "you never miss an opportunity to twist the knife of guilt." "Would I inflict guilt on the best of all my friends?" Nathan asked innocently. "Well, Silas," he said, "if you had not abandoned your God, I would not have this fine house to visit on my trips to Jericho." Silas smiled a little less. "I did not abandon my God, you know. Abandoned those who worship him in hypocrisy." Jotham could believe that Nathan had Jotham could believe that Nathan had once been young, but not so with Silas. Jotham thought he looked as old as the olive trees that he'd camped under, and just as wrinkled. The three of them made their way through the house to the courtyard in the center, and here they met another man. "My friends," Nathan said to Nathan and Jotham, "I would like you to meet another friend of mine. This is Hazra of Bethlehem." They greeted each other. They all sat down on stone benches around a pond made of shiny tiles. Jotham had never seen a place like this. He much didn't like being inside buildings. He much preferred open spaces of the grazing meadows. But this house, it had so many colors and places to sit, and trees and bushes, that Jotham thought he could probably stay here for a very long time. The three adults sat around talking for what seemed like forever to Jotham. They talked about the Romans and about Herod and about the many things that Jotham didn't even understand. But when they started talking about the Messiah, Jotham's ears perked up. "You must be excited," Nathan said to Hazra, "that the Messiah shall soon come to Bethlehem." Hazra scoffed. "What would the Messiah be doing coming to such an insignificant place?" "Well, the scripture is clear," Silas said, as he spoke of the things now becoming familiar to Jotham. It was well past dark when Silas finally lit some oil lamps that hung from the arches. Bored with all the talk, Jotham stood and began to explore. Several alcoves surrounded the room, and in one of those Jotham found a scroll on a pedestal. The alcove was decorated with Hebrew symbols that Jotham didn't understand. Fascinated, he gently touched the surface of the scroll. It's the Torah. The voice of Silas came from right behind Jotham. Jotham jumped in fright and withdrew his hand quickly. Do not fear, Silas said gently. All Jehovah's children should learn to read the Torah. Jotham looked at Silas as if the old man had just announced he could fly. You see, Silas continued, I am not such a bad Jew and not so different from Nathan. I study the Torah every day and I say prayers. It's just that I don't have much passion for some of our religious takes, or rather some of the forms that people give it. Jotham thought about this for a moment, then nodded, almost understanding. Then Silas turned to the rest of the group and announced in a loud voice, My friends, let me take you for an evening meal. There is an inn down the street, and the owner is a friend of mine. The older man agreed, and the four walked a short way down the street, which was still busy with people even after dark. They entered another building, made of the same reddish plaster. As they walked down through the door and into the center of the room, Jotham saw that there were many people eating at the wooden tables. Hasbro let out a yell to the man at the other side of the room. Seth, he called with a huge grin, I have brought friends to meet your hospitality. The man had a look of panic on his face and motioned something to Hazra, but Hazra paid no attention. We shall have your finest lamb and your finest bread, he was saying. Finally, Jotham looked behind to where Seth had been gesturing, and there, sitting at the table by the door, was Decca of Megiddo. And if you remember, Decca of Megiddo was the evil person who was trying to search for him in those caves, who had kidnapped him in a way. And that's really a hard place to leave off. But that's where we have to leave off. I am going to read you this Bible verse. I will in Psalms. I will instruct you and teach you the way you should go. I will counsel you and watch over you. Do not be like the horse or the mule, which have no understanding, but you must be controlled by a bit and bridle, or they will not come to you. Many are the woes of the wicked, but the Lord's unfailing love surrounds the man who trusts in him. Rejoice in the Lord and be glad, you righteous. Sing, all you who are upright in heart. Bartholomew had found out the difference between willful defiance and a simple mistake. And just as the rabbi did not punish Bartholomew for his mistake, God does not punish us for ours. Like any good parent, he must discipline us when we defiantly disobey his commands. But he has a merciful heart toward us when we simply make mistakes, or even if we purposely disobey him but repent, as long as we have a humble heart and ask for forgiveness. As we celebrate this Christmas season, remember, there wouldn't even be a Christmas season if it weren't for God's merciful love. Because he loves us, he has shown mercy by sending us his only son to us. In other words, Jesus and God's response to our selfish, sinful nature. Let him know today and every day that you appreciate his gift by being yourself merciful towards others. What a beautiful reminder and a good lesson for us today to think about, because sometimes we want that mercy from others, but we forget to bestow that mercy on someone else. So, again, I want to read that one sentence. As we celebrate the Christmas season, remember there wouldn't be a Christmas season if it weren't for God's merciful love. Such a love that we cannot even fathom to do what he did by sending his son, and not in the big city of Jericho like Jotham thinks is going to happen or should happen, in a very humble, not a nice little town called Bethlehem. And we're going to see all about that soon. All right, thank you for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see what happens when Decca is in that little place and the inn or whatever, and we'll see on Tuesday morning in assembly what happens in that chapter. All right, thanks. Bye.